11 spine-chilling Stalker horror tales, unexplainable encounters that will haunt you forever. Sarah felt the weight of the world land on her shoulders on moving day in Cedar Grove. The place looked picture-perfect, like something out of a postcard. Neighbors waved as she unloaded boxes, their smiles warm and welcoming. But as night fell and shadows draped over the quaint streets, an unsettling chill crawled up her spine. What lay beneath the town's pretty facade? After her long shifts at the diner, Sarah returned to a quiet home. Her children nestled deep in their beds, the stillness unnerving. She wiped the sleep from her eyes, ready to rest. But with darkness came the shadows, figures darting at the edge of her vision, retreating only to reappear like creatures from a nightmare. She shook her head, scolding herself for thinking it was anything but fatigue. Yet that sensation, the feeling of being watched, lingered like a lingering perfume. One evening, after a grueling shift of greasy plates and heavy coffee, she caught sight of Mr. Thompson, her neighbor. Known as the town's beloved history teacher, he drifted through the streets, not a word escaping his lips. Sometimes he stopped, staring at her house as if it held secrets he was desperate to uncover. Sarah's heart raced. Was she being paranoid? Or was there more to this man than met the eye? Weird things began appearing in her yard. A weathered shoe, a cracked toy, a tattered school notebook full of twisted scribbles. Each item felt like an omen, a ghostly connection to this community's past. The other moms at the park whispered tales of children who had vanished, slipping through the cracks of time, and Sarah's nerves grew frayed, feeding her growing dread. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Each day intensified her fears, pushing her to document everything in a frayed journal. Late at night, she wrote about the shadows that skimmed past her windows, her children's apprehensive whispers of nightmares. Then came the night of the whispers. Sarah jolted awake to soft murmurs outside her window. Heart pounding, she raced to the glass, but her breath caught in her throat as she found nothing. Just emptiness. The world held its breath, and then anger slammed through her. Fueled by terror, she confronted Mr. Thompson. The conversation spiraled into chaos, his gaze darting, words hurried and defensive. He claimed he was simply looking out for her, just a concerned neighbor. But Sarah felt a cold dread wrap around her heart. Something was terribly wrong. Her children's laughter turned to fearful hushed tones, her once peaceful home now felt like a cage. When they went missing one fateful day, no trace left behind, she was thrown into a dark game, facing a man she once thought she could trust. In the suffocating silence, a breath brushed against her neck, a warning. "Where are you?" she whispered to the empty night, knowing the answers might lead her deeper into a nightmare. The tick of the clock became her only companion, marking the final moments before everything changed forever. Sarah's heart thumped loudly in her chest, loud enough to drown out the eerie silence that enveloped her home. The shadows, once merely whispers of anxiety, had transformed into full-fledged terror. She clutched the journal tightly, its pages rumpled and stained with tears, filled with frantic scribbles about the man next door and the cursed history of Cedar Grove. She had searched every room, every corner, every shadow cast by the moonlight, but her children were gone. The hollow beats of the clock mocked her, punctuating her fear like the footsteps of a hunter closing in for the kill. With each tick, she confirmed her worst fears. What if she never saw them again? Fumbling with her phone, she realized the signal was weak, barely connecting. Why now? She gasped, rubbing her trembling hands together. They had taken her children, and all she had was a strip of dim light illuminating the chaos around her. Then the knocks came. Soft but deliberate, like a morbid countdown. They echoed through the halls, accompanied by the creaks of the old house as if it were warning her to stay put. She gritted her teeth, forcing her legs to move as she approached the door. Was it Mr. Thompson? He had to know something. He had been there, lurking in the shadows too long. Peering through the peephole, she saw only darkness on the other side. The world outside felt infinitely more dangerous than the home she had once cherished. She hesitated, stomach churning, then grasped the knob, twisting it with resolve. The door swung open, revealing nothing but the fog of night. Panic surged. But then she noticed it. A small shape dropped at her feet. She leaned down, finding a frayed blue ribbon. Her heart sank. The same ribbon her daughter wore in her hair every day, the one she had admired that morning as she pinned it on. "No, please, no," she whispered, her throat dry, eyes stinging. Disgust clawed at her insides. Searching for answers, she dashed to the backyard, where fleeting memories danced in her mind. A wide stretch of grass, laughter, bright-colored slides. But now, it was shrouded in an unsettling darkness. Breathless, she scanned the dim yard for anything unusual. There, among the overgrown bushes, sat the cracked toy, hauntingly familiar. It was her son's favorite, a fire truck, chipped and rusted, as if it had been left outside for decades rather than just days. It was a sinister cast of the innocence that had once filled her home. "Where are you?" she shouted, her voice slicing through the still air. There was no response, only an unsettling hush. Suddenly, she felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. The hair on the back of her neck prickled, and a shiver ran down her spine. A figure loomed behind the trees. Sarah squinted, heart pounding in rhythm with her fears, but as she approached, it melted back into the night. Her breath faltered as dread pooled at the pit of her stomach. Was it Mr. Thompson? Had he been watching her all along? "Help! Someone help me!" she screamed into the void. But her voice echoed back, a taunting reminder of her helplessness. Just then, a whisper floated through the wind, chilling her to the bone. "You'll find them when the time is right." Sarah staggered back, panic spreading through her body. What did that mean? She had to find her children. With the darkness closing in, she turned, heart racing, thoughts racing faster. Would she be strong enough to face this nightmare alone? The night fell deeper, and shadows twisted around her. What awaited her in the hours to come? Was there a chance to save her children, or was she too late? A flash of movement caught her eye. What if it was them? Or something worse? The hunt was about to begin. The night pressed down heavily, engulfing Sarah in its suffocating embrace. She stumbled back toward the house, her mind a whirlwind of fear and desperation. The familiar creaks of the floor, once comforting, now echoed like distant gunshots, marking time in a house turned prison. "Think, Sarah. You have to think," she urged herself, her breath coming in frantic bursts. She couldn't stand here, paralyzed by fear. The whisper lingered in her ears, "When the time is right," but the time already felt stolen. Her feet moved instinctively, leading her towards the garage, where tools might serve her defense against whatever it was that lurked outside. The garage door felt too heavy as she pushed it up, the screech of metal announcing her presence to whatever shadows lay beyond. Inside, the clutter of forgotten projects and half-finished tasks surrounded her. She needed light. Fumbling in desperation, her fingers finally found the flashlight. It flickered weakly before steadying, its beam cutting through the thick darkness, illuminating the old shelves. She scanned for anything she could use, a hammer, some rope, anything. Movement outside caught her eye, a shadow darting past the dimly lit window. Her heart jumped. What was that? She swung the flashlight around, but the beam caught quiet piles of dust and cobwebs. "Okay, stay calm," she whispered, her voice trembling. The silence outside felt alive, pulsing with unseen energy. Clutching the flashlight like a weapon, Sarah made her way back outside, the beam swaying nervously in front of her. Then she heard it. Distinct laughter, wafting through the air, childlike and innocent. She spun around, her gut twisting. "Mark? Lily?" The call came out as a breathless whisper, the hope a fragile flicker. Mommy. The sound echoed again. This time, closer. Her heart soared, pounding against her ribs. Where are you? Where are you? She frantically called, but it wasn't her children's voices that responded. Instead, a low chuckle emerged from the shadows. It was a voice not belonging to either of them, deep, mocking, dripping with malice. It slithered through the air, suffocating her courage. You'll find them, just follow the laughter. Stop it. She tried to sound fierce, but fear turned her voice into a quiver. The laughter began to merge with the dark, bouncing off the trees, taunting her, an echo of everything she feared losing. Throwing caution to the wind, Sarah sprinted across the backyard, fueled by adrenaline and desperate hope. The laughter grew louder, more sinister. Where are you? She pleaded, inching toward the source of the sound. As she approached the thick cluster of trees at the back of her property, dread coiled tighter around her heart like a vice. The trees loomed high and dark, whispering secrets she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. The flashlight beam pierced through the branches, revealing a small clearing. The laughter stopped abruptly, plunging her into deafening silence. Lily. Mark. She screamed, the urgency cracking through her voice. Then she saw it, a pile of tree branches, unnervingly arranged in the shape of a child, the unmistakable blonde hair sticking out from the pile like a gruesome signature. No! Sarah cried, her legs refusing to carry her forward. This could not be happening, but the shadows shifted again. The figure she had seen before appeared, now clearer, stepping out from behind the trees. Dark eyes gleamed, a malevolent smile curling on twisted lips. Sarah's heart dropped, feeling the weight of despair crushing down. You're too late, Sarah, it whispered, voice smooth and sickly sweet. They were never truly gone. Frantically, she turned and fled, shadows chasing her every step. The house was only a doorway away, but she could almost hear the echo of their laughter still, luring her into the dark. What if whatever held her children had already found her? What if it was already inside the house, waiting? In a desperate push, Sarah flung open the back door and stepped inside, but a cold presence followed, wrapping around her like a shroud. She glanced back at the doorway. Icy grips of fear paralyzing her. The time was nearing and she was running out of it. In the stillness that settled over her, she could feel the dark, waiting, promising to reveal its secrets only if she dared to listen. Would she be able to uncover the truth, or would she forever be lost in the fog of Cedar Grove? The door slammed shut behind her, and Sarah leaned against it, heart racing, breath coming in sharp gasps. The familiar surroundings of her home felt foreign and hostile now, shadows pooling in the corners as if they were alive. She could still hear that voice, silky and mocking, echoing in her mind. The flashlight was dimming, flickering as it struggled against the creeping shadows. Stay calm, she whispered again, though the words felt hollow in her throat. She could not let the darkness claim her. Just then, a chill swept through the hallway. The air thickened, turned electric. She strained to listen, hoping against hope that she would hear her children's laughter again to shatter this suffocating silence. But in its place, a childish giggle pierced the quiet. Follow the laughter, Mommy. The whisper slithered through her, wrapping around her heart, squeezing tightly. Lily. Mark. She glanced into the living room, where shadows danced on the walls. An empty house. Nothing but the remnants of a normal life, a couch, family photos, a cluttered coffee table. Yet something essential had shattered. The laughter echoed again, just above a whisper, teasing at the edges of her mind. With a surge of determination, Sarah stepped forward, the flashlight beam trembling in her hand. You stop this right now! She shouted, surprised at the strength weaving through her voice. The laughter responded, rumbling as if it came from behind her. She spun around, illuminating the darkened kitchen, the faint outline of a figure fleeting between the counters. Her body froze. Where are you? Right here. The voice curled around her like a serpent. In a panic, Sarah darted back to the hallway. She had to get to the stairs. If she could reach her children's rooms, maybe just maybe, she could retrieve something familiar. It felt like a safe haven, a sliver of security amidst the overwhelming dread. As she ran, the floorboards creaked beneath her, seeming to groan in protest. Each step echoed louder than her racing heart. Nearing the staircase, cold air brushed against her skin like icy fingertips, and she dared not look back. The laughter grew louder, full of delight, yet layered with something darker beneath. An insatiable hunger that cut through her resolve. She reached the first step, gripping the banister tightly, ready to climb. But a figure suddenly emerged at the top, silhouetted against the pale moonlight filtering through the window. It wasn't Lily or Mark. She could see the outline of a woman, hair long and wild, eyes glimmering with an unnatural sheen. "You wanted to see them?" The figure crooned, her voice dripping with malice. "They're not far, just waiting." "No!" Sarah shouted defiantly, the flame of her courage igniting in the face of this horror. The figure smirked, the shadows around her swirling with a life of their own. With a swift motion, Sarah lunged up the stairs, her fear transforming into raw, survival instinct. The world behind her began to dissolve into chaos, the laughter warping into cries, but she pressed on. As she reached the landing, disoriented, she turned to each door lining the hallway, seeking a clue, some sign that her children had been there, that they were okay. "Where are you?" She screamed again, the air heavy around her. A soft sound crept toward her ears, a murmur, a plea. It came from the farthest room, where the door was slightly ajar. With cautious determination, she pushed it open, heart hammering, the sight before her halted her breath. A pale figure sat in the corner, its back turned. Was it her child? A glimmer of hope shone bright and fleeting. "Lily? Mark?" She whispered, slowly. The figure turned. It smiled too wide, too unnatural. "Mommy," it echoed, yet it wasn't her children's voice. The world tilted, vertigo slamming against her senses. And then she heard it again, the laughter, close and menacing. Too many voices, a symphony of shadows all calling for her. Each laugh, a reminder of her worst fears. Sarah staggered backward, the backing of the hallway gone. She was now surrounded by darkness with nowhere left to turn. "Maybe," the figure said, tilting its head, "isn't it time you join them?" With an overwhelming dread that clawed at her sanity, Sarah stumbled back into the darkness, the room spinning until the world hushed. Would Sarah be able to resist the temptation of shadows or succumb to the darkness that has claimed so many before her? What lay hidden in the quiet corners of her own home? The silence was deafening. Sarah stood frozen, swallowed by the thick dark, memories crashing against her like waves. She could almost feel the corners of her mind fraying, unraveling under the weight of fear. Where had those voices come from? With shaky hands, she raised the flashlight, its weak glow fighting against the oppressive night. Shadows warped and writhed like snakes, teasing and taunting her. She blinked, but the figure was still there, a mockery of everything her heart yearned for. "Lily? Mark?" She called again, desperation seeping into her voice. The only response was the echo of her own cries fading into the gloom. Something shifted behind her. The laughter swelled, layered with whispers that called her name, beckoning her closer. "Mommy," they sang softly, a cruel lullaby that twisted her insides. Her breath hitched in her throat as she faced the doorway. Against her better judgment, she stepped further into the room. The air thickened with a stifling dread that clung to her skin. The figure shifted again, tilting its head like an inquisitive bird. There was nothing familiar in its smile. "Join us," it crooned, stretching its arms wide, the voice oozing with a syrupy sweetness that made her skin crawl. "They're waiting for you, Mommy, leave them alone." Sarah screamed, but her shout seemed to dissipate into the shadows, absorbed by the malevolence that spun around her. As she stumbled back, she tripped over a pile of toys, the clatter resonating through the emptiness. The figure shrieked with laughter, a cacophony of voices pooling around her feet. We're all just a game away. Panic clawed at her throat. She needed to escape. The children, she had to find them. With a fierce twist of her body, she sprinted back into the hallway, the flashlight sputtering, its beam barely illuminating her path. The laughter morphed into gasps of glee, moving as if it were alive. Sarah swallowed against the bile rising in her throat. The walls themselves seemed to pulse, closing in around her like a lover turned hostile. She dashed toward Lily's room, the door inviting and terrifying. "I'm coming. Hold on," she shouted, as if her bravery could chase away the shadows nipping at her heels. Before she could reach it, a flash of movement caught her eye. A small, familiar figure darted down the hall. "Mommy! Mark!" Relief flooded her, blinding her to the darkness that surged behind him. She scooped him into her arms, holding on as if he were a lifeline. "Mommy, did you find Lily?" he asked, little hands gripping her tightly. She stroked his hair, trying to calm the storm of fear swirling inside her. "Not yet. But we'll find her. We need to get out of here. Mommy, they won't let us." His voice fell to a whisper, eyes wide and terrified. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, the figure reappeared, lurking at the end of the hall like a specter. "Too late," it sang, the shadows flaring behind it. "She's one of us now. Join." Sarah felt the chill wrap around her heart. There was no escape, no sanctuary in this monstrous home. The walls echoed with laughter, the shadows closing in like a vice. Heart pounding, she dropped to the floor, pulling Mark down next to her. "They can't have you," she yelled, gripping him tightly, but the darkness surged forward, swallowing the beam of light from the flashlight, plunging them into blackness. All around, laughter erupted, cacophonous and jubilant, twisting the air like a knife. Then came that voice again, hissing softly, "It's time to play." Sweat dripped from Sarah's brow as she clutched Mark tightly, panicked thoughts racing through her mind. They had to fight back. But how? "Mommy," Mark whimpered. She looked down into his innocent face, terror mirroring her own. "We'll be okay," she promised, but doubt clawed at her insides. What if the shadows were right? What if they were trapped forever in this hollow shell of a home? Pushing aside her fear, Sarah hoisted Mark up. "We're getting to the stairs," she shouted. But the hallway shifted again, the figure closer now, its smile widening. As the laughter crescendoed into a terrifying roar, Sarah felt the walls of reality begin to fracture. It was time to confront the darkness, to uncover the truth hidden in the shadows. Would they face the depths of despair together, or would they be claimed by the very horror that haunted their home? The question hung like a noose, just out of reach. Sarah's heart pounded as she shoved Mark deeper into her protective embrace. The darkness roared around them, the laughter spiraling into something almost tangible. Not what she wanted to hear. Not now. She tried to focus, tried to block it all out, but each wave of dreadful noise gnawed at her sanity. "Mommy, it's hurting." Mark's voice was trembling, barely audible over the chaos. Sweat slicked his forehead, and she could feel the tremors racing through him. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, though she felt anything but okay. Reality felt slippery, like oil under her feet. She glanced back down the hallway, where the figure loomed closer, its grin wide and menacing, eyes glinting with malice. Sucking in a breath, Sarah inhaled the scent of dust mingled with despair. She had to think. "We need to get to the stairs, Mark. Stick close. Don't let go of me." With each step toward the staircase, dread pooled within her, a weight that pressed down with every heartbeat. She reached the bottom step, her pulse thrumming in her ears. "Hold on tightly," she urged, hoisting him up as she took the first step. The darkness pushed against them like a physical force, but she wouldn't stop. They wouldn't be trapped here. They couldn't let the voices win. With each creak of the wooden stairs, she felt them inching closer, right behind her. "Mommy!" Mark gasped. Her glance shot back, and her blood turned to ice. Shadows danced down the stairwell, undulating and writhing, a dark tide chasing them. "Run!" she shouted, her voice slicing through the air, desperate and raw. They sprinted upward, her feet racing faster than her mind could process. A frigid wind surged past, chilling her to the bone. Mark was heavy in her arms. She pushed onward, each step a battle against the screeching laughter echoing all around. Lily's room was on the top floor, but she had to find her before it was too late. "Where is she?" she whispered, tinged with hopelessness. "I'll find you, Lily." The final step crumbled under her weight as she lunged onto the second floor. Windows rattled, but she could barely focus on the storm outside. She moved toward a door at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar, inviting and sinister. She could see a flicker of pale light dancing from within. "Mommy, I'm scared." Mark's small voice pulled her from her daze. "Stay here," she ordered, but he promptly shook his head. "No. I'm with you." Frustration flared inside her, mixing with fear as she felt the dark laughter gathering behind them in sharp crescendos, eager and hungry. They could still retreat, but could they live with that choice, knowing Lily was unaccounted for? "I'll check, okay? Just a second." Mark nodded, eyes wide as she gently set him down but kept her hand grasped tightly around his wrist. Together, they edged toward the door, each slow step feeling like an eternity. As Sarah glanced through the door, her breath caught. Lily sat cross-legged in a circle of broken toys, her back turned, the dim light flickering erratically. "Lily!" Sarah cried, hope spiraling through her. Lily's head snapped up, and her expression was blank, listless. "Mommy?" she echoed, something about the tone chilling Sarah to her core. "Are you okay?" But before she could respond, shadows exploded from all corners of the room, enveloping the little girl. "Join us," they taunted, their voices melting together, promising sweet nothings dipped in terror. "No!" Sarah lunged, instinct taking over as she yanked Mark back. "Lily, come with me." When the shadows surged forward, wrapping around her daughter, despair twisted inside Sarah. The figure reappeared at the door. "It's time to play," it hissed, mouth stretching in that ghastly smile. "Run, Mark! Run!" she screamed. They dashed down the hallway, the world swirling around them, every corner alive with shadow and sound. But what lay ahead? The darkness closed in tighter, and she feared that the true game was just beginning. Would they become the next players? Would Lily join them? Questions hung ominously in the air as they ran deeper into the unknown. What price would they pay for their freedom? Each stride thundered in her ears, the pounding of her heart matching the chaos surrounding them. Shadows clung to the corners of the hallway, creeping along the walls like a living thing, hungry, waiting. Sarah flung herself forward, dragging Mark behind her, desperate to escape the nightmare that hunted them. The long corridor twisted before them, a maze of possibilities, but every pathway led her back to that door. That haunting room where Lily sat, ensnared, unaware of the danger. Clenching her jaw, Sarah fought back the rising tide of panic. She had to believe they could find her daughter and escape. "Where are we going?" Mark's voice quivered, a tremble reflecting his fear. "Anywhere but here," she replied sharply, anxiety tightening around her throat. Suddenly, a slamming door echoed from behind them, sending Sarah's heart racing even faster. They attracted attention, and the shadows were reinvigorated by the sound, racing towards them with a ferocity that sent chills coursing down her spine. They couldn't afford to look back. "Not now. Come on," she urged, adrenaline propelling her forward. They dashed toward a staircase at the end of the hall, her thoughts racing faster than her legs as she whispered a fevered prayer. As they reached the staircase, she felt a hand grasping at her ankle, the icy fingers pulling her toward the ground. It was some kind of shadow creature, clawing at her flesh. With a heart-stopping scream, she kicked free, and they bolted up the stairs two at a time. But as soon as she reached the landing, the laughter returned, loud and maniacal, echoing off the walls, swallowing her resolve. "Mommy," Mark whimpered, clutching her tightly. She could see his small body trembling. "Hurry." She pressed through gritted teeth, fear fueling her urgency. They couldn't stop. They wouldn't. Another door loomed ahead. Thick, looming shadows pulsed against it. Sarah took a deep breath, forcing herself to flick the handle and swing the door open. Light spilled into the room, revealing walls lined with toys, all glistening with something dark and glimmering. But it wasn't Lily. "Where is she?" Panic swelled in her chest as she stepped through the door, searching in vain. Splintered furniture scattered beneath her feet, but nothing felt real, nothing but an aching absence where her daughter should be. "Mommy," Mark's voice faded into a whimper, breaking her focus. She turned sharply, and a wave of dread engulfed her as she saw the shadows coalescing in the corners, twisting and snarling. "Get back!" Sarah shouted, her voice firm despite the dread drumming in her heart. But the shadows surged toward them, wild and hungry. "Mommy, I can't!" Mark shouted, tears streaming down his cheeks. The shadows laughed, glee pouring from their dark forms like poison. As they pressed closer, a figure emerged from the shadows, the grotesque face stretching into a smile that sent ripples of terror coursing through her. "Join us," it crooned, and even in its horrifying visage, a certain sickly allure clung to its words. "No!" Sarah screamed, pulling Mark against her waist. "Not my son." She felt empty, the clutch of darkness tightening around her throat, but in her desperation, a flicker of hope ignited in her chest. "We can't give up. We have to keep fighting." It was the only thing she had, the only balm against the consuming dread. With renewed determination, she turned to the far wall. Splintered planks of wood blocked a small window, but it was their only chance. "We need to break through," she ordered, her voice igniting in fervor. Mark clutched at her leg, eyes wide with uncertainty, but she couldn't pause to reassure him. She hurled her shoulder against the wooden planks, feeling them crack under her weight. The laughter behind her grew louder, twisting into a cacophony, but she wouldn't turn around. Another heave. The wood splintered further, an opening visible at last. "Let us go," she urged, grasping Mark's hand tightly again. But just as they were about to leap through, the figure lunged for them from the shadows, and in those indefinable moments of chaos, marked by desperation and the knowledge that Lily could still be lost in the void, Sarah realized the game was just beginning. "What do we have to sacrifice to escape this hell?" She breathed, the question heavy on her heart as the darkness surged forward, eager to receive its dues. The splintering wood cracked open like a wound, splattering dust and debris into the air. Sarah fought through the panic that threatened to overwhelm her. Behind her, the grotesque figure twisted in midair, its laughter a shrieking gale that threatened to drown out her thoughts. It was hungry. For her. For Mark. "Go!" she shouted. Mark hesitated, his tiny body quaking with fear. That hesitation almost cost them. The creature lunged, arms outstretched, grinning with the ravenous glee of a predator. With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah shoved Mark through the window hole and followed him, scraping her shoulder against the jagged edge. They tumbled into the damp, musty air outside, landing on their backs in a thick patch of grass. The night sky loomed overhead, a dark expanse punctuated by cold stars that felt indifferent to their plight. But they couldn't rest. Sarah felt the darkness behind her, crawling out of the room like smoke. She grabbed Mark's hand once more, pulling him up. "Run!" They dashed through the shadows of the old yard, cluttered with shattered furniture and warped playgrounds, relics of a time long forgotten. The laughter echoed closer, a haunting melody that seeped into her bones. Something wasn't right. There should have been a road, a way out. But the entire yard stretched on, endless and twisted, each corner leading deeper into the darkness. "Where's the way home?" Mark whimpered, panic-stricken eyes wide with uncertainty. "Just keep moving," she barked back, grit in her teeth as they hurried past a dilapidated swing that creaked eerily in the wind. Suddenly, Mark stopped abruptly, pulling back against her. "Mommy." In that moment, Sarah felt the first cold fingers of despair tightening around her heart. She turned to see him staring ahead, eyes wide as the shadows swirled, forming a wall before them. The laughter grew louder, circling them like hungry wolves. "Keep your eyes on me," she demanded, panic simmering beneath her stern tone. She couldn't let him see her fear, couldn't show him despair could swallow them whole, but before she could move again, the shadows swelled. They writhed and twisted, coiling around the trees and the playhouse, pulsating like living fog. With a snap, the air grew colder, carrying a whisper that caressed her skin. "Join us, Sarah." "No," she shouted, but her voice felt weak, swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere creeping around them. A pit formed in her stomach. What waited in those shadows? What did they want with her? Mark blinked back tears, and for the first time, she noticed it. A single thread of glimmering light far away through the swirling darkness, like a lighthouse in a storm. "Mommy, look!" He pointed, hope flickering in his tiny voice. "Let us go," she answered, heart pounding hard against her ribs. They sprinted towards the light, but as they moved, the shadows coalesced again. Dark tendrils pressed against them, pulling at their limbs, frigid and unyielding. Mark stumbled, slipping beneath the weight of shadow. "I can't." "Don't let go," Sarah shouted, but it felt like they were moving in syrup, every step an eternity. The laughter became a chorus, voices overlapping, promising despair and darkness. Just as they broke through the swirling edges, Sarah felt an overwhelming sensation pulling them backward, a force trying to reclaim them into the depths of that nightmarish realm. And then, a piercing scream filled the air. The sound was so raw, so filled with agony, it halted Sarah in her tracks. The shadows hesitated, momentarily retreating. "Lily." Her heart raced, a drumbeat of dread. "We have to find her," she gasped, but the shadows curled back, eager to drag them into their cold embrace. Mark clung tightly, his eyes darting with confusion, fear, and that terrible feeling of hopelessness. "What do we do now?" The laughter resumed, mocking, triumphant. But a single thought pierced through Sarah's mind. "What if we can't escape?" She whispered to herself, the weight of the question heavy as the shadows closed in. That breathless silence, as dread and urgency collided, it dawned on her. Their only chance might be something far darker than they had ever imagined. What horrors lurked in the darkness just waiting for them to make that choice? The shadows throbbed with hunger, creeping ever closer, and Sarah's breath rattled in her chest. "We can't stay here. We can't." Her grip on Mark tightened, as if she could pull him into safety with sheer will. He nodded, but the fear in his eyes echoed the uncertainty gnawing at her own heart. "Trust me," she said, though she barely believed the words. What did she know of trust in this nightmare? The scream echoed again, a sound that dug into the marrow of her bones. "Lily!" she cried out, desperate to pierce the veil of darkness. "Can you hear me?" The shadows trembled, recoiling slightly, but the laughter grew louder, drowning out her voice. Each burst of mirth felt like fingernails dragging down a chalkboard, sending shivers down her spine. The laughter wrapped around the yard, a sinister blanket smothering hope. Sarah looked at Mark, his small face illuminated by the faint light ahead. "We have to keep moving." She nudged him towards the light, feeling the cold tendrils brush against her ankles, gnawing and tugging, like they were trying to pull her apart. As they moved, the landscape shifted around them. The playground swings creaked ominously, their chains whispering secrets only the shadows could understand. Sarah felt the darkness pool in her stomach, a heaviness that threatened to crush her. "What if we don't find her?" Mark's voice quivered, as he dragged his feet, almost sinking into the damp earth. "We will." Sarah's voice was fierce, but inside, doubt grew like weeds. Ahead, the sliver of light flickered, swaying like a flame in the wind. But hope became a cruel trick. As they approached, the light seemed to pulse, revealing a ground that shifted beneath their feet. The sharp grass beneath them morphed into jagged stones that dug into their soles. Just a little further. She pushed, as the shadows screamed in fury, desperate to reclaim their lost prey. Suddenly, the laughter transformed into a chorus of whispers, each one melting together like an ancient incantation. Join us, it drummed within her skull, wrapping around her mind like a noose. Mommy! Mark cried out, fear bubbling over. I can't. Sarah could feel it too, the pull of despair. The unhallowed existences surged with energy, clawing at the edges of her sanity. But that glimmer of light beckoning her forward? It was all she had. We have to go now. She yanked Mark forward, the movement jerking him back into action. They stumbled toward the light, but just as they neared, the ground split open, a chasm revealing swirling shadows that curled like smoke, whispering her name. Sarah froze. Mark! Don't look! But he was transfixed, messages of dread grazing the back of her neck. It was as if the darkness itself held its breath, waiting for the moment to strike. The stark light shimmered, casting stark shadows across her face. A voice, silky and smooth as oil, slithered through the air. You can come with us, Sarah. Find solace, be free. The words painted a vision in her mind: freedom, safety, escape from the nightmare. But her heart screamed against the temptation. No! She bellowed, shaking her head violently. We're not yours. With a surge of determination, she jerked Mark back, dragging him past the yawning void of despair. They stumbled, skin prickling with the cold breath of darkness chasing them, the air thick and electric with terror. Then, half faded and flickering out of existence, a form appeared in the light, a figure, desperately reaching towards them. Sarah! Mark! I'm here! Lily! Sarah gasped. But in the blink of an eye, the light flickered and the shadows lunged again, desperate to claim their prize. No! Sarah screamed, fear slashing at her heart. We can't lose her. The shadows surged forward, threatening to engulf them all. Just as Sarah felt the weight of darkness about to overwhelm her, a thought pierced through the chaos. What if the light was a trap too? And that moment hung suspended in time, blood pounding in her ears, straddling the line between hope and despair. What if the way out was the most horrifying choice of all? Sarah's mind raced as she fought against the shadows that danced hungrily along the edges of the light. It was a precarious balance, the flickering glimmer against the oppressive darkness. Lily's voice called out, haunting yet filled with desperation, Mommy. Her heart ached, every ounce of instinct pulling her toward that voice, but caution gnawed at her resolve. How could she be sure the light was safe? The very thought left her reeling as shadows reached hungrily toward her son, Mark. Stay close. She urged, grasping his small hand tighter, panic flooding her senses. Lily's figure flickered again, the brightness slicing through the dark like a beacon. With the shadows swirling, it felt like a noose tightening around them, invisible hands clutching at her clothes, dragging them back, urging them to surrender. Sarah locked her eyes on Lily, desperation pushing her forward. I'm coming. Just hold on. The darkness exploded behind them, echoes of laughter mingled with the guttural growls that hungered for torment. With each step, light and dark warred within her, but her children's safety consumed her. This way! She shouted, wheeling around in defiance, and they forged ahead together, crashing through the chaos. Suddenly, a sharp wind whipped past, a cold blast urging them to turn back. Wisps of shadow coiled around Sarah's ankles, threatening to pull her to the ground. Mark stumbled, the fear in his eyes piercing her heart. She couldn't fail now. Hold on, Mark. She yelled, yanking him through the choke of darkness, but then there was silence, an unnatural quiet that settled like a blanket. Just ahead, the darkness swirled like a storm, peeling back to reveal an open door, framed by the light of a home that felt both familiar and foreign. "In there!" Sarah cried, urging them past the threshold. With a final push, they dove inside. The door slammed shut behind them with a thunderous finality, sealing away the cacophony of shadows. The stillness echoed, and, for a moment, they were cocooned in quiet. "We're safe," Sarah panted, disbelief threading through her anxieties, but the relief was fleeting. The room felt alive, dark corners whispering secrets as cold, ominous shadows crawled beneath the furniture. "We have to find a way out of here," Mark said, his voice shaky but steadying. Sarah nodded. They couldn't stay. But where was Lily? Lily! Sarah shouted, the name bursting forth with all the hope she clung to. The silence taunted her, cold and inky. A dim glow drew her attention, a faint flicker of light edging from the door they had just entered. She approached cautiously. The moment she stepped closer, shapes began to form beyond the crack. The specter of a child's shadow danced, limbs frail yet beckoning. "Mommy," it was Lily, but the words twisted in the air, taunting, hollow. She couldn't let herself be fooled again. "Lily, I'm here. I'm coming," Sarah shouted, gripping Mark's hand. The shadows flashed, arraying in a tumultuous rage. They surged at her, creeping on every front. But Sarah pushed back, adrenaline igniting her bravery. A choice loomed before her. "Trust your heart," Mark cried, and in that moment, she realized the truth. The light was her way out, just beyond the myopic darkness, but she had to confront it. "We can't go back," she whispered to both of them, gathering her courage. "We have to believe in the light." They lunged forward as the shadows clawed at their heels, escaping into a brilliant brightness, the air buzzing with possibilities. The laughter morphed to howls behind them, furious at their defiance. But they moved together, chanting a mantra of hope to drown out darkness. "Stay together." As they reached the door, Sarah felt the weight of loss settle, but her resolve strong, knowing they could weather anything as long as they held on. With one last glance back at the chaos, she pushed the door open, and light exploded around them. She gasped as they were thrust into an open field, blooming with sunlight, vibrant and alive, just outside Cedar Grove. The shadows dissipated, melting back like mist as the cries faded into an echo. One breath, then another. "We did it," she whispered, wide-eyed. Mark beamed up at her, a smile breaking through the weight of terror they had faced. "But Lily?" His voice trembled, the hope attuned with fear. "I won't lose her," Sarah swore, determination curling into every beat of her heart. They wouldn't be separated again. They would reclaim their joy and face whatever haunted them together. Together, they stepped into the light, calling on Lily, spirit rising with the air, knowing love would guide her back. "Nothing will take us again," Sarah vowed, and she felt the fragile splinters of fear slip away, but there would be no more waiting on the edge of shadows. They would find her, embrace all that was left behind, because the past had no power when faced with such fierce love and daring courage. And so they began their journey back, eyes bright with hope, ready to reconnect, filled with the fevered pulse of life, echoing those three powerful words, "We are together." You need to subscribe now to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this thrilling conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this epic finale. Your support is what makes all the difference.